It's unlikely that we're going to see the wave of commitments from the state of California to the University of Louisville like we saw in the Flyville 23 class, but that doesn't mean that the Cardinals program isn't going to be involved and can't replicate some of that success in the Flyville 24 class. We're going to talk about four-star defensive back Marcelles Williams and some of this week's action across the University of Louisville athletics department. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to thank you all again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Main thing we're going to talk about on today's episode of the show, four-star defensive back Marcelles Williams from St. John Bosco, which most Louisville fans are very familiar with, has recently stated that he would like to take an official visit to Louisville. We'll discuss that. We'll also talk about the Louisville men's basketball team losing to Georgia Tech over the weekend, how it seemed like the momentum gained over the past couple games kind of didn't show up. And then we'll talk about the baseball team suffering the first loss of the season, but still having a solid weekend overall. Beginning with the football recruiting side of things, obviously there's been a ton of offers for the 2024 class over the past month and a half to 2 months for Jeff Brom and the Louisville football coaching staff. But most of those have kind of been on the eastern half of the United States. You know, Eastern Shoreboard, the Sunshine State of Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, even Mississippi now, Tennessee, Kentucky, the local areas. You know, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Ohio, so on and so forth. But one thing that I was thinking about, and this tidbit kind of I wouldn't necessarily say confirmed, but it made me start to think about it a little bit more. And that is, it's very unlikely that we're going to see the trend and the wave of commitments that we saw in Flyville 23 from the state of California to the University of Louisville football program. Let's just, call it how it is. But I don't think that means that we're not going to see this program involved with the state of California and four-star defensive back Marcelles Williams stating that he wants to possibly take an official visit to Louisville just shows that despite maybe not getting 5 or 6 guys from the state of California, that doesn't mean that St. John Bosco to the Ville pipeline is completely destroyed. Sure, maybe you can look at Flyville 23 as an outlier of sorts when it comes to the amount of California guys. You talk about Pierce Clarkson, Aaron Williams, Jaleel McClain, Jamari Johnson. I'm trying to think of the other California guys that had committed. Well, DeAndre Moore decommitted. Regardless, you understand what I'm saying. But I do think that there is a chance that Louisville can still go into the state of California and get a commitment or two from a couple of programs around there, St. John Bosco being one of them, so on and so forth. Marcelles Williams is one of the more premier athletes in the state of California, the 8th best recruit in the state, according to the 24/7 Sports website, actually 7th best, according to the 24/7 Sports composite, ranked as the 70th best prospect in the state of California, 7th best cornerback. So overall, I think that this is a recruitment that I'm not going to say it's impossible for Louisville to win, because every time I feel like, oh, there's no way Louisville can get in the mix here. Well, TJ Capers, a 5-star prospect from Miami, commits to Louisville. Or Aaron Williams commits to Louisville, a top 200 player. Jamari Johnson, looks past Oregon and commits to Louisville. So on and so forth. Madden Sanker from Georgia. what I'm trying to say is that the NIL infrastructure in place for the University of Louisville at this time is seemingly doing something right. That's not to say that it's unparalleled across the country, but obviously, speaking to the caliber of commitments that the Cardinals have gotten, something is going right. So I'm not going to count Louisville out of any recruitment at this point in time, but I'm also not going to sit here and be naive and be obtuse and suggest that Louisville is going to be going toe-to-toe with the blue blood programs of college football with every single recruit. That's not going to happen. I would caution you to believe that, and I probably believe that you don't believe that, but nonetheless, I still have to say it. But Marcelles Williams is a recruit that I think he made some interesting comments in an article recently with Greg Biggins from 24/7 Sports, who is a very big member of the recruiting landscape over on the West Coast. He had an article come out this past week. It was titled "4-Star Defensive Back Marcelles Williams is slated for a busy March and April." He essentially goes on to say he is among the nation's top corners and is set for a busy spring. Has good length and natural cover instincts, shows physicality and run support, and has the ability to cover in the slot or out wide, and has the kind of versatility in his game that college coaches covet. Excuse me. On the recruiting front, Williams already holds scholarship offers from just about every top program in the country, and Alabama is one that offered pretty recently. Obviously, an offer of that magnitude was something that Williams did not take lightly. Essentially, he says about Nick Saban, he's the greatest coach of all time. Alabama is the most successful program of all time. They're the standard. That's why this offer means so much to me. Coach Saban is a DB guy. That's his position, and he works closely with the DBs. They get guys drafted every year. So when you get an offer from Alabama as a cornerback, it is an unbelievable feeling. He goes on to talk about a couple of different teams in this article. Oklahoma is one, Washington, Colorado, LSU, Ohio State, USC. Mentions Louisville at the very end. It's a very small cameo. He mentions this. This is the last quote that's about him. I would love to get back to Miami for an official visit and Louisville too. I already visited both schools before and I loved it there. And then he mentions LSU as well. So I think that there's a couple of different ways you can, look at this article. I will say that he is a legacy guy. His two brothers, one played for USC, one played for Arizona in the past 5 years or so. USC going to be hard to look over as well. USC and UCLA are going to be involved in this recruitment. Alabama, obviously, you have to take the comments that Marcelles Williams made about the Crimson Tide program to a very high standard, because I think that there's definitely some merit in those words. But I take it two ways. The first way is I like that Louisville was mentioned. I like that Marcelles Williams made it a point to mention that he wanted to get back to Louisville for an official visit. That would be a place, at the very least, that he would like to get back on an official visit. But I also look at it and say, well, they weren't really mentioned that much. Like, there's paragraphs for each school, like Washington, Colorado, LSU, Alabama, Oklahoma. These schools are talked about in depth, and Louisville gets a little note at the end, like, yeah, I'd like to visit them again. I liked it there. So you have to wonder, well, how large of a competitor are the Cardinals going to be in this recruitment? Because sure, you have the 2023 connection with some of these guys that you played high school ball with at St. John Bosco, but how much does that really matter to Marcelles Williams? I mean, there's a lot of other, factors to look at when it comes to picking a place you're playing in college. I think that maybe I'm looking too much into it. Maybe I am on the right track, so to speak. Maybe my hesitancy is a little warranted with more schools getting talked about more. Maybe what was on the outside looking in. What is not going to be up for debate is, You have to follow the trail of visits now. He's looking to take unofficial visits first and then scheduling those official visits. So the thing to focus on here, and if you listen to the Locked On Louisville podcast, this is something that you probably never heard from me before, and that is you will tell how serious a prospect is by the visits that they take. You only get a handful of official visits, and Louisville's going to have to get one of those visits. If they want a chance in this recruitment, they're going to have to get one of those visits. Now, obviously, it helps that he's been here before. There are some connections to some players on the staff. Obviously, Pearson, Steve Clarkson, Flyville is very, very solid when it comes to those St. John Bosco players. But at the end of the day, we've seen that connection does not mean the end-all, be-all, right? So that's something to focus on as we move forward. So ultimately, I look at this and I think that there's a chance, but the main thing is I'm not going to get my hopes up until a visit plan is announced. So that's going to be all of the football recruiting talk on today's episode of the show. We're now going to talk about some of the weekend's action for the Louisville Athletics Department, beginning with the men's basketball team losing at Georgia Tech. We're going to talk about why the momentum I believe the Cardinals had gained is seemingly all gone. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, then you have to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know my goal has been to eat a little healthier this year, but if you're like me, I don't really like to compromise the taste. The healthiness is what it is, but Built Bar is very, very unique. What it does is it allows you to see the macros. It's 100% just like a protein bar when it comes to nutrition, but it's covered in 100% real chocolate, so you get that candy bar taste as well. There's a huge variety of flavors from churro, coconut, almond, peanut butter brownie, so much more. For really all history, the only way you be able to get Built Bar is at built.com. Not any longer. You can go to Walmart and go to their pharmacy section and get a 13-bar box there. Or you can also go to actually a 4-bar box. The 13-bar box is at Sam's Club with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. All an opportunity that Built offers to you. Do not miss out on the fantastic opportunity with Built Bar. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball all in one place, plus hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, heading into the second segment of the show, discussing the men's basketball team's loss to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets on Saturday afternoon. Now losers of 2 straight. The Cardinals lost to the Yellow Jackets down in Atlanta, 83-67. All of the momentum that I felt like the team had gained over the past couple of games seemingly is no longer there. Some of the improvement that I thought I was seeing this team make just wasn't shown against Georgia Tech. The things that I was hoping to see, if you listened to an episode yesterday, consistent effort, better improving defense, certain individual performances. Seems like none of those three. That's not how English works. None of those three really proved to be the case. This was an instance to where, Georgia Tech led by double digits. I'm trying to see when exactly they opened up a double-digit lead. Louisville had a lead. They were up 19-16 with about halfway through the first half, and then Georgia Tech, went on a little bit of a run. They got their first double-digit lead with 3 minutes left in the first half and went to the halftime intermission with a 45-32 advantage. Opened up the second half on another run. They ended up going down by, I think, 18 points. It was 52-34 with about 17 and some change left in the game. Louisville did their best to try to come back. They didn't just fall over and, accept defeat. The Cardinals tried to come back in this game, even much so that they got the score to, I believe it was, let's see, what was that score where they had it seemingly close? It was, let's see, I believe it was a 5-point game at one point, if I'm not mistaken. 66-61 on J.J. Trainor's dunk with 5 minutes to go. Unfortunately, at that point, Georgia Tech went on a pretty crucial 5-0 run to push the lead back to double digits, and Louisville just was never able to get going again. Georgia Tech outscored the Cardinals in the second half despite that run. So, look, this was an instance to where, I just think that the Cardinals did not necessarily play well at all. And at the end of the day, there were aspects of this game that seemed like it reverted back to where this team was in early January or late December, where the team was doing the little things wrong. They weren't necessarily hustling all the way. Louisville shot the ball pretty poorly from the field. They were 44% from the field, but they were 23.5% from behind the arc. 4 of 17 from behind the arc. That's not good enough. El Ellis had a rough day offensively. He had 15 points. Mike James was solid with 14. Kamari Lance continues to look solid in ACC play. He tied the Louisville high with 15 points. He was 6 of 11 from the field, 3 of 5 from behind the arc. J.J. Traynor continued to score in double figures. He had 10. But still just not good enough. Jalen Withers had 8 points. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield played 20 minutes, had 3 points. The main thing for me, once again, defense. I think it's effort and defense are my top 2 issues with this team continually. I think that there are times to where Louisville looks improved on both ends of the court. However, it's not a consistent improvement. So it's almost like when you look at a box score or when you look at, the shooting percentages, you don't necessarily see those improvements because they're plagued by poor effort and poor defense. But when you watch the game, you see glimpses here and there. You see glimpses in that second half comeback from Louisville. You see glimpses at random times in the first half where it looks like this team is slowly, marginally getting better in certain aspects of the game, but it is almost immediately overshadowed by the lack of consistent hustle and defense. Defensively, the Cardinals once again allowed 80 points to the opponent. When you look at the past couple of games for Louisville, I want to go back to that Florida State loss. After the team won against Georgia Tech, they gave up 81 to Florida State, 91 to Pittsburgh, 93 to Miami, 61 to Virginia. Virginia has been struggling offensively. 73 to Clemson, 79 to Duke, and now 83 to Georgia Tech. So I think offensively, the team's looking a little bit better each and every game or throughout the season for the most part. But defensively, we're just not seeing this team, improve the way we were hoping. Still getting beat on backdoor cuts. Teams that utilize a lot of motion on the offensive end cause Louisville fits. Defensively, I think that, it looks like they're trying to communicate, but there's lapses in, the assignments and the roles. And when players are moving off of screens, Louisville has trouble not only marking the guy rolling to the basket, but also the secondary guy over in the corner, so on and so forth. So, defensively has been a struggle. On Saturday, you can look at the box score and say, oh, well, Georgia Tech was 12 of 29 from the three-point line. They were 17 of 22 from free throw line. They shot 10 more free throws than the Cardinals. They're 48% from the field. How many times is the team going to shoot 41%? Well, the reality is Georgia Tech was 11 and 17 for a reason. They weren't necessarily playing good in conference play. They were 3 and 14, and the Cardinals had beaten them at the KFCM Center. A lot of these three-pointers were really, all honesty, wide open shots that were open enough to where it's kind of stupid for you not to take those shots. And Just defensively speaking, a rough go-around in this second matchup against Georgia Tech. I wasn't pleased with the defense. I mean, I think that this team is continually fighting, so I give them that credit. I know it's not easy to continually lose, so I give these guys credit and respect for, trying each and every game, because they could just throw in the towel, which they're not. But still, I was hoping to see a little bit more from this team in the matchup against Georgia Tech. The team now looks to the last week of the regular season. They've got the senior day on Tuesday evening against Virginia Tech, and hopefully the team can revert back to some of the improvements that they were showing. So continuing on in this weekend's action, the baseball team went 2-1 this weekend against Bowling Green, suffering the first defeat of the season. We'll talk about this weekend's action here in just a second. Before we do that, I want to thank you all again for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team, every day. It was sort of an up and down weekend for the baseball team. Coming into the weekend 4-0 after sweeping Bucknell and defeating Xavier on Tuesday, the Cardinals hosted the Bowling Green Falcons at Jim Patterson Stadium, and they essentially went 2-1 on the weekend. Pitching, for the most part, was solid outside of the Saturday game. Another solid performance from the Cardinals pitching staff in the opening matchup on that Friday. Trying to pull up Ryan Hawk's numbers from that game. Let's see. I'm not sure if it's going to take this long or not. I'm not sure why it's taking this long. But overall, I think that, people look at this like, oh, the pitching's not good. We gave up 9 runs to Bowling Green in the Saturday game. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it is what it is. It's still very, very early in the season. I'm not necessarily too worried at all. It was another solid outing from Ryan Hawks. He gave up 1 earned run in 7 1/3 innings, had 8 strikeouts. I guess staff ace, who's gotten the ball on each of the Friday starts so far. Hawks looked fantastic. Jack Payton had a home run in the first inning, and really kind of a pitching duel, so to speak, at Jim Patterson Stadium, I should say, on Friday evening. Bowling Green would then tie it up in the 6th, but shortly after, it was Jack Payton again with a big-time double, and Eddie King Jr. had the game-winning RBI, or go-ahead RBI. So very solid performance on Friday evening for the Cardinals. Unfortunately, that momentum was halted a little bit with a tough loss on Saturday evening. It was 9-6 in favor of the Falcons, the first loss of the season for the Cardinals. And this was a tough one to swallow because Louisville seemed like they were going to blow the Falcons out of the water. It was 5-1 early on. I'm looking, I think it was 5-1, and the Cardinals took a 65 lead in the 8th inning. But a couple of costly base hits into the gaps. Bowling Green would then have 4 runs in that inning. Louisville showed some signs of life, but unfortunately some suboptimal running on the base paths proved to be costly for the Cardinals in that one. So Louisville suffers the first loss of the season, but turns around on Sunday, wins the series with a 14-1 dominating performance. Looking at what they were able to do, 14 runs, 15 hits, just 1 allowed run. Patrick Forbes, 3 for 4. He had 2 RBIs, and he scored as well. 5 other players had 2 hits on Sunday. Ryan McCoy hit another home run, which he has been phenomenal. Carson Leggett had 1 run, but 5 2/3 innings, 6 strikeouts to go along with that. And then the bullpen did what they needed to do in the conclusion of the game. So obviously Louisville, pretty solid weekend. I mean, it's you can't expect the team to just consistently go undefeated through the rest of the season. I mean, it's not ideal the way they lost, but I mean, it's baseball. It is what it is. You're going to lose some games, but the team did what they needed to do. The pitching won them the game on Friday night. The hitting, and I guess pitching as well, won the game on Sunday afternoon. But it's still a very young season. We aren't even in March yet. They have one game left in the month of February. That is a game at Jim Patterson Stadium against Eastern Kentucky, opening up a weekend trip, a key weekend trip to Houston, Texas, home of my Houston Astros. Shout out to Dusty Baker and the squad, trying to get another World Series championship, but I digress. Pretty solid test for the first time they're on the road, but they have three solid opponents: Texas A&M, TCU, and Michigan down in the Shriners Children College Classic. So something to focus on. This is going to be a big test for the Cardinals in this young season, and we will see how that goes. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to talk about the softball team's big weekend, talk about Taylor Roby making history and a solid weekend down in Florida, along with some other stuff. So everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here very soon. Thanks again for sharing the podcast. Means a ton. With the month coming to a close, we're going to have obviously some basketball coverage as the seasons come to a close. Football recruiting. We'll have some people on to talk about spring ball coming up for the Cardinals and Jeff Brom's first season and more. If you have any other suggestions of things you would like us to talk about, definitely let us know. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here